Well, I got up at 3 this morning. I went to bed at 7, and I have enough time to do a video on things that are on my mind. I've been reading very critical scholars of the Jesus seminar, very skeptical about any history uh, in the New Testament about Jesus, etc. Burton Mack, who wrote the New Testament, and John Dominic Crossan, who killed Jesus. And so this kind of combines with some of my thoughts and reflections on uh, the basis for our hope in God and in the future of the world. And I also saw Ken Burns' documentary, The U.S. and the Holocaust, and what that teaches us about, you know, who we are in America or as Americans, uh, and how most people think or respond to various situations in history or have done so in history. And it's very important, and it has a lot to do with our political situation, where a high number of people in the United States like and support somebody like Trump, a great liar. I was watching a program the other day with clips from Ted Cruz, of all things, of all people, saying that Trump was a pathological liar, that it would be a disaster to have somebody like that in office. Mitch McConnell and others, and how these kinds of people change their positions when they want to hold on to power and know that antagonizing Trump spells disaster. We have a governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, against critical theory in the schools, etc. And I don't want to get into specifics about woke and critical theory and all that, but I'm a firm believer that the truth will set us free, John 8:32, and that knowing history is incredibly important, and that most people don't know history and therefore are condemned to repeat it. And so DeSantis is trying to win votes and even have a national presence by being very Jerry Springer, I call it that, outrageous positions, sending the immigrants to Martha's Vineyard and all these kinds of attention getting displays of ruthlessness as part of a tough political position, blaming immigrants for crime, not gun shootings, you know, immigrants whom I happen to know very well from the church I've been going to for over 10 years now. And, considering the economic situation of the country with inability to fill many positions, these are all demagogic. These are all ways that you lead the people astray. That's what demagogy is. Um, Lying to people, but angering them and getting them afraid so that they will vote for you. All the ads, all this money that has been donated for ads, radical left, he follows Biden, he's a radical. All these kinds of things is how you lead the people as a demagogue. Incredibly uh, important, especially when we, as I have been doing repeatedly, study what led Hitler to power and how so many millions of Germans, an advanced nation compared to most other nations, put their faith and trust in Hitler, and how Americans reacted when Hitler uh, was came into power in 33, and how many newspaper reports there were of outrageous actions being committed against Jews. What was the American populace response to that in general? And what did Franklin Roosevelt, feel he was able to do or not to do given the thinking of a great majority of Americans? So Americans have been known to miss the boat. Before I forget, Ken Burns in this documentary, I think part two I recorded it last night. I haven't seen it. He says Hitler was very interested in two things: the Jim Crow laws in America. He knew America had a famous democracy, a famous constitution, Declaration of Independence, all these things. But he said the blacks are second class citizens, you know, and they, you know, uh, how we have to study how Americans got to, um, discriminate against blacks with the Jim Crow laws, you know, and got away with it. How do you study? How do you study? Uh, how to start legislating uh, and restricting the rights of Jews to have stores or to teach in universities or eventually to even exist. How do you do that? He studied America. Here's a picture of kind of a poster for Jim Crow, white and colored drinking fountains. And if you notice, the black one for blacks is more primitive and an older model than the refrigerated one for whites. And the other thing that Hitler and his advisors, these smart German people, uh, were studying was manifest destiny. Americans had this idea that we have to conquer all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the west, go west, young man, etc., and wipe out or place in reservations the Native Americans. Well, Hitler said we need Lebensraum, we need living space, and instead of going west, we're going to go east to Poland and eventually Russia and get the natural resources and everything else that is needed. So, this is all history. These are all things to think about if you want to meditate. And I've been trying to meditate, and one of my readings in the morning is Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, who talks about virtue and talks about wisdom and talks about what a wise person does. Philosophy, the love of wisdom. And so I became kind of sort of inspired to you know, do this video. The last time I did a video, you may recall if you watched it, that I spoke about I did a Spanish video, and I spoke about the Madonna de la Estrada, the Our Lady of the Street, which I see now that I have a big problem with keeping images up in this taskbar. But this is Our Lady of the Street that I discovered to be the image um, that was given to me when I was looking for an apartment in Rome to study, and I didn't have it at hand at the time, and I didn't have the prayer in the back in the time, so I wanted to just say it now, even though I did the video in Spanish. This is a prayer from Pius XII, who was very devoted to Our Lady of the Street, which is kept in the Church of Gesù, the Jesuit mother church in Rome, that I love, very much. And Pius XII, Eugenio Pacelli, a Roman from Rome, would pray and compose this prayer. He was Pope by then, the 2nd of July, 1957, a prayer to the Lady of the Way or of the Streets. Oh, sweet Mary, our celestial mother, be you our guide to our steps in the street or way that is so often uphill and rocky of life. And when this life arrives at its end or goal, be you for us the door of heaven, and show us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. So that's a beautiful prayer of Our Lady of the Street. So what are my thoughts on these things that I am reading, and what kind of hope can we have, you know, for ourselves in this world? And it seems to me that we have a world that needs great repair and kindness and civility and knowledge and wisdom and ethics, not demagogy. When I was a professor in the seminary, uh, there was some talk in the air, or at least the idea was in the air. Should you coddle and please the seminarians? Should you give them a lot of breaks so that they're happy and don't leave? There's few vocations. Should you give them high grades, which the seminary traditionally did? Everybody, give A's. A guy came to me one day and says, "Why did you give me a C?" And I said, "Because I didn't want to give you an F." I taught online at a university that shall remain nameless, Catholic seminary and university, or yeah. And a memo came out sometime later saying we were very embarrassed at graduation. Everyone was summa cum laude. So that's a meaningless distinction if everybody has it with the highest praise, you know. And they said we have to watch great inflation. But in my seminary, the idea was, I put it this way: do you stoop down to the level of seminarians and please them, including lying about their performance and lessening your demands so that they don't really grow, at least academically, but sort of feel they are superheroes? Or do you challenge them and do you try to raise them up, not keep them where they are? The same thing applies to politics. Do you say, how do I touch the right buttons to get elected? That involves lying, that involves deceit, that involves easy promises, that involves picking on the most vulnerable, like these immigrants, and saying we're not afraid to be cruel. There'll be some double speak. DeSantis will say that they, are going to be fine in Martha's Vineyard, or uh, they signed papers, to go there. I mean, they were promised all kinds of things. I took courses in Mexico 50 years ago almost on how the conquerors of America, speaking of manifest destiny, the conquerors of South America, Mexico, for example, would have a papal bull saying the Pope is the owner of the world. He's got the power of Christ, the two swords, the spiritual realm and the earthly realm. He's granted the King of Spain and the King of Portugal power to preach the gospel in these lands that don't know Christ. And he's given him the sword to enforce the preaching of the gospel. And these bulls would be read in Latin or something. And once that they were warned, you are now under the power of the Pope and under the power of the King of Spain, you have to submit or we will conquer you. This is humanity. This is our history. If you pretend to be a Catholic, or even any kind of a good person, or even a philosophical person, which many people probably don't even care about that, know thyself, self knowledge. And if you don't know what human beings can be like and are like, and how they respond to situations, you have violated the very first philosophical rule for seeking wisdom. And you've also violated the first theological, mystical rule for sanctity. Sanctity. Catherine of Siena, doctor of the church, almost all the saints. Know yourself. That's the basis, the foundation for advance in the spiritual life. The other day I was thinking about a friend of mine that used the word pro-life, and I wanted to send him a message back, which I didn't. Don't use big words like pro-life, which you don't know what it means. Pro-life doesn't mean you're going to criminalize abortion and put women in jail or even little girls in jail. And that makes you pro-life. Pro-life means you are pro-life in all its forms, including all the issues that lead to, maybe even rape and desperation and promiscuous sex and unwise decisions. All these things, wisdom has everything to do with life. That's what Seneca was talking about. He's saying wisdom, he's in sort of a debate with Posidonius and all these philosophers. He says wisdom is the invented, sailboats and bathtubs with hot water that comes into the bathtub. I mean, his letter to Lucilius, I think, number 90. He goes, no, no, wisdom has to do with virtue and the law of nature and the soul and wisdom. That's what philosophy has to do with the deepest questions. And if we avoid them, and if our politicians stoop down to the lowest level in order to be elected, and you have all these clips nowadays, we have film for everything. Mitch McConnell, all these people that remain silent so as not to antagonize Trump. And then the media. The media, that's why I have a friend of mine who is absolutely not an intellectual or an educated person. He's a great guy, great heart. He knows a lot about his field, which is in the manual realm more than anything. And he said Liz Cheney is a scumbag. Liz Cheney has stepped out of her comfort zone, has lost politically in Wyoming, which was a done deed anyway. She has sacrificed herself for the truth. But huge numbers of people brainwashed by the media, and probably people that listen to my videos, I'm preaching to the choir, but they hear and they are goaded like cows into thinking she's a scumbag. Why? Because she has been exposing what happened January 6th. And this same friend of mine said, why do they have to keep talking about that? In other words, you don't talk about unpleasant things. Don't know yourself. Don't know your history. Don't do critical, theory or race theory or whatever. Don't do any of that. Don't make us feel. Don't hurt our feelings. Put a band-aid on the wound. That's it. There'll be no improvement at all. Because you have been going to a doctor that says, oh, you don't have cancer. You don't have a heart problem. You don't have anything. Or you go to a mechanic. Tells you, your car's fine. Well, my car just broke down in the middle of the road. Well, if you applied those kinds of practices of not knowing what's going on, not knowing the truth, not facing the facts to any other area of life, you would have a disaster and you would squawk and complain right away. The problem with history is it may took Hitler basically 12 years, from 33 to 45, for the Germans to learn their lesson. Till the very end, fake news and other things were, saying, that they were winning the war and all these other lies. And fake news is incredibly effective, and that's why we have the problems we have with, for example, Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, everybody kind of knows his story. He was a Harvard student, a geek or whatever, wanted to date girls or something. Whatever it was, he creates this social media platform. And he's not interested in money. He's out there in California. If you see the movie, The Social Network, etc., he's wearing his T-shirt, and he's not into money. He's a geek, or whatever you call nerds, computer people. Once you go public and you start having the numbers game and the money game, then all of a sudden, mammon, you cannot love God and mammon, you cannot love the truth and profit. or have profit motive as your primary, even if it's unconscious. I know people that think they're very Catholic, but they don't touch their taxes. They come up with the idea that taxes are wasted. Oh, they're not wasted on the military and they're not wasted on roads, I assume. But as far as health insurance and maybe education and welfare and minimum wage stuff and all that, there, don't touch my mammon. So that, you have these politicians on film expressing their real thoughts. And then you have somebody like Adam Kinzinger saying in private they all agree Trump lost and they think he's a horrible, but they lie to the masses so that they can stay in power. And the minute you get into the Jerry Springer thing, like this Marjorie Green, whatever her name is, wherever she's from, I think Georgia, the more outrageous, the more people are mesmerized. That's the level of masses and masses of Americans. The results are going to be horrible. But with Hitler, getting back to the Hitler, he was going to have 1,000-year Reich and make America great again, you know, and and this is the kind of stuff that the papers were printing. These is all pictures that I took watching Ken Burns' documentary. The Sunday Express, founded by Lord Beaverbrook, London, March 26, 1933. Hitler now had been chancellor for a while, a few months, since January of 33. And the kind of news that was getting out there was Germans deny Jew persecutions. Hitler minister's official message to the Sunday Express, stories spread by Hitler's enemies. This is the same pattern with Trump. People defend Trump by personal loyalty, his supporters. Other politicians defend him to get his supporters to not be against them. But in private, they say the truth. And they say people just hate. This friend of mine says people just, that one word Trump. Well, because because people that know history and know what a demagogue is, who's above the law, where everything is based on personal loyalty to the man, not to the principles or to the Constitution or anything, then you start corroding all the institutions. The FBI is corrupt. The Congress is corrupt. Our faith is in Trump. We now have an emotional attachment to this bully that is our bully. He's the guy who's going to keep Bubba in the jail from raping me. And yeah, sure, I have to be kind to my bully. Name one Jew who has died. And so this is the kind of stuff that was, um, in the news. And it continued that way. And even Franklin Delano Roosevelt had to tread very carefully to not antagonize basically Americans who were anti-immigrant. The same stuff we hear now. The Jews will not replace us. The Jews run the world. Henry Ford promoted the protocols of the elders of Zion. I knew people in Rome, seminarians and religious people that go for that kind of stuff. A forgery that the Jews got together and decided to run the world. I'm reading, in my car, I keep a book in case I do not take one with me to an appointment where I may have to wait. And the book that I keep in my car for those situations is this book given to me by a student of mine. It's called The Hiding Place, and it's a true story of a real Christian woman who hid Jews in her apartment. Her father was a jeweler. This is the best of the Dutch ethical streak, which I find in Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt and in Eleanor Roosevelt, who was a Roosevelt from the Oyster Bay Theodore side of the family, which was not always very friendly with the Hyde Park or the other side of the family that Franklin was from. His father, Sir James, a great man. Franklin's mother, Sarah Delano, I guess Huguenot, French Protestant stock. But these Dutch, when they are ethical, they're not, wimpy Christian crybaby, false news ethical, unethical. They are truly into repairing the world and taking very, very uh, principled stances, even at danger, which is how you really know a Christian when they take up the cross and not, lie to save their hide. And so I just decided to put on Facebook how she starts trying to get, ration cards for the Jews, violating obviously Nazi laws, etc. And it's fascinating to read these firsthand accounts, um, of how very few but very brave people did something to save the Jews. But basically speaking, America didn't even want to meet its quota in accepting the number of Jews that were admissible under American immigration laws. So, 6 million people eventually, Jews eventually died in the concentration camps. And there are, many quotes, just like some of these quotes from Republican politicians who despise Trump but publicly pretend they support him because they want to stay in power. So they want to stay in power for themselves, not because it's good for America. They know it's not really good for America, but they'd rather be in power and hold their nose as they see what is happening to America than to actually do what, for example, I was trying to do as a seminary professor: lift up the people, not go down to their level and even fire them up more. And so that's how history has worked. And if we talk about the kingdom of God, and we talk about, the new world, the new creation, pro-life, and what we have is this mess of gun violence, robot policemen who know how to shoot but not think. They're great at shooting fleeing unarmed blacks. But when they confront, even if it's 15 of them in Uvalde, Texas, confronting one guy, oh, they're not very brave. And so we are really If the final judgment came, and I saw it the other day on somebody put it in Facebook. A friend liked something that I put on Facebook that said, I'm pretty sure the Bible doesn't, Jesus didn't say, I'm pretty sure it doesn't say, when I was hungry, you put me on a bus. When I was thirsty, you booked me a one-way plane ticket. Or when I was a stranger, you treated me like cargo and shipped me off for political gain. So that when we talk about conversion, and we talk about conversion to pro-life, it's not a simple, stupid thing. Keep it simple, stupid. A little kiss, a Judas kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. It requires honesty and truth seeking and love of wisdom. And probably this is not the way to have popular YouTube videos. I'm sure that if a pretty girl does whatever she does on a video, she's going to have 1 million followers and even make money, or whatever number of followers. I think with 1,000 you get money. And so I go back to where I started, the cross, the story of Christ. What exactly happened? How much of it is wishful thinking? According to Crossan, whom I don't really like that much, but he has points. And I know that the Gospels themselves have been shaped in certain ways. I know from history and great, very Catholic, but very critical scholars like Joseph Fitzmyer, the Jesuit who died in his 90s not too long ago. Pontius Pilate was an SOB. I've said it before. Pontius Pilate was known to execute people without trial. Pontius Pilate was removed for being too cruel by the Romans. So to put Pontius Pilate as an effeminate man who washed his hands and was afraid of the Jews and said 3 times he's innocent, and then lets the Jews crucify him, when the creed actually says crucified or suffered under Pontius Pilate. You have to use your brain to understand how these things were composed. So today in 2022, if you can't think, you can't be a real Christian. Because a real Christian loves the truth and is not opposed to seeking it sincerely. I'm not saying that arriving at the truth is always easy. On the contrary. But you have to make an effort, and arriving at the truth is not done by listening to lies and listening only to what you think is going to flatter you and not hurt your feelings. That is not the path of truth seeking. That is not the narrow road. That is not this, as I read, this rocky road of life that Pius XII talked about. He did the same thing Roosevelt did. If I speak out against what the Nazis are doing to the Jews, it'll go worse for them. Well, wow, how much worse did it go? Roosevelt said the same thing. It was Eleanor who said, at least let that ship. There's another program called They Don't Want Us, or something like that, on PBS. Eleanor convinced Roosevelt to tell somebody at the State Department, let that ship come in because nobody wanted the Jews here. Then, of course, you see the concentration camps and all that stuff, and then like Luke says, the crowds, when they saw Jesus crucified, they beat their breasts and returned home, you know, in penance. We learned the hard way. I'm trying very humbly, with very few listeners, to put in my grain of sand as to what I believe to be the truth, whether it goes against me or not. I've already, in some ways, paid for saying the truth. I'm not a model of anything, but nevertheless, I do speak out, trying to shed some light on this rocky road that we are on. Because if we do not know history, uh, the improvement will be none, perhaps. I was reading one of my books, Northrop Frye, who's a very great literary critic and a Christian, he's probably dead now, The Bible Code. I'm reading that too. And he quotes Shelley, the poet Shelley, uh, saying that, the progress can be toward worse or toward better. There's no guarantee that this line, for Roosevelt thought that history shows a line that is, going up, but I think that we can even go down even faster, and even the danger to the planet, if you don't even believe that if you abuse, and we have abused the planet, irreversibly horrible catastrophes will continue to occur. Ask my sister in California about the heat. There was decades of denying all this stuff. Now they're a little bit more, kind of concerned about it, or at least open to it. But it's a very slow learning curve, and I'm not optimistic. I have to say that. But I wanted to say something, and this is what I have said this time.